My neighbor intercepted me at the elevator. The soft metallic sigh of the doors felt like the building itself was tired of holding secrets. I stood there, coffee in one hand, keys in the other, when Mrs. Caldwell appeared as if from nowhere. She was always elegant in a way that made you feel underdressed. Her silver hair and a neat bun lipstick too red for 9 in the morning. "Good morning, Emily," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Can I ask you something personal?" I hesitated, shifting the weight of my purse. "Sure. What's wrong? Do you know who comes to your apartment every Tuesday afternoon?" For a second, I thought she was joking. I even laughed, a small, confused sound that hung between us. What are you talking about?" "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing," she said quickly, but her expression didn't match her words. "It's just, I've noticed someone entering your place while you're gone, every Tuesday. I thought maybe you had a cleaner or a friend dropping by." My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. No one has a key except my husband and me." She nodded slowly, like she was confirming something she already knew. "Well, maybe you should check. You can never be too careful, dear." Then the elevator arrived and she disappeared inside, leaving me with that sentence echoing in my head like a warning bell. All day at work, her words gnawed at me. I replayed them between emails and phone calls, trying to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she mixed up apartments. There were 3 identical doors on every floor. Maybe she saw my son Daniel visiting to pick up something, though he lived across town, now busy with his new wife Lauren. He hardly came by anymore. When I got home that evening, I stood in the hallway for a long time staring at my door. Everything looked normal. The lock, the doormat, even the faint scent of lavender from the air freshener I'd placed last weekend. Inside the apartment was spotless. Too spotless. I went room to room, checking drawers, doors, closets, like a fool chasing shadows. There was nothing missing, nothing out of place, and yet I couldn't shake off the feeling that someone had been here. That night over dinner, I told Mark. He barely looked up from his plate. "You're taking that woman too seriously," he said. "You know how she is. Always spying, always gossiping. I bet she just wants attention." Maybe I murmured, but the unease didn't fade. Mark reached across the table, took my hand briefly, then pulled away to check his phone. "Forget it, Em. You'll drive yourself crazy." But I couldn't. Not after the way Mrs. Caldwell had looked at me, almost pitying. By the weekend, curiosity had become obsession. I found myself searching online for cheap security cameras, reading reviews at midnight. Finally, I ordered one. A small black device, easy to hide, motion activated. When it arrived, I set it up near the entryway, angled toward the front door. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, nothing more. Tuesday came too quickly. I went to work as usual, trying to focus, pretending I didn't care. But by the time I got home, my pulse was racing. I poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and opened the camera app. The timeline showed a motion alert, 1:13 p.m. My throat went dry. I pressed play. The front door opened. Someone stepped in slowly, confidently. I froze. The figure moved into the light, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. It was Lauren, my son's wife. Her long blonde hair tied back, her hand clutching a small tote bag. She looked around as if making sure no one was home, then walked straight toward the bedroom. I watched paralyzed as she opened my dresser drawer. She wasn't stealing. She was placing something inside, a small envelope. Then she took out a bottle of perfume, sprayed it once into the air, smiled faintly, and left. The video ended, but I couldn't move. The sound of my own breathing filled the silence. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Why would Lauren come here? And why on Tuesdays I wanted to confront her immediately, but something stopped me. A strange, instinctive fear. Instead, I replayed the video again, then again. Her expression wasn't guilty. It was calm, deliberate, like someone following a routine. That night I hardly slept. Every sound in the apartment felt wrong. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock. I lay beside Mark, who was already asleep, his phone glowing faintly on the nightstand. My thoughts spiraled. What if he knew? What if they both knew? By morning, I had convinced myself there had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a reason that would make sense. Maybe she was leaving a note for Daniel. Maybe she thought it was his place. But when I checked the drawer where she had placed the envelope, my heart stopped. It was gone. Completely gone. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my hands. The air felt heavier, thicker. I realized something terrifying. Someone had come again after she left. Someone who knew I'd be looking. When I passed Mrs. Caldwell in the hallway later that day, she smiled her same bright smile. "Everything all right, dear?" "Yes." I managed forcing a smile. "Everything's fine." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes sharp as glass. "Good. I'm glad you're keeping an eye on things." As the elevator doors closed behind her, I felt it. The first real stab of fear. Not the fear of what I'd seen, but of what I hadn't yet discovered. The next morning, the world felt colder. The sunlight through the curtains was pale and distant, as if it too didn't want to touch me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into my untouched coffee. The video from yesterday still looping in my head. Lauren's calm face, her deliberate movements, the soft click of the drawer, the envelope that vanished. Every frame burned itself into my memory. Mark came out of the bedroom half-dressed, humming to himself. He looked at me, smiled absently. "You're up early." His voice sounded normal. Too normal. I searched his face for anything that might betray guilt or fear. But he looked exactly as he always did. The same man who had shared my mornings for 23 years. The same man who had once held my hand through miscarriages, mortgages, and my mother's funeral. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not much. You worry too much, Em. You always have." He kissed the top of my head and left for work. The moment the door shut, I exhaled, long shaky like I'd been holding my breath all night. I looked around the apartment. The walls that had once been comfort now felt like strangers. Every photo frame, every piece of furniture suddenly seemed like evidence in a life I didn't understand anymore. I played the video again. Then I rewound it, slowed it down. At one point, right before Lauren left, she turned toward the bedroom mirror and smiled. Not the friendly daughter-in-law smile I'd seen 100 times before, but something quiet or satisfied. It was almost intimate. I couldn't stop the thought that followed. She wasn't alone in this. The idea was too big to face all at once. I paced the living room, hands shaking. I opened the bedroom closet, checked drawers again. Empty. The envelope was gone, but the space it left behind was worse than anything physical. It was the absence of trust, of safety. By noon, I'd stopped crying. Something inside me had gone still, and that stillness felt powerful. The grief had burned itself into clarity. I went to the computer and opened a new folder, Tuesday Files. Inside, I saved the video, renamed it Record 1. Then I copied it to a flash drive and hid it in the lining of my coat pocket. For hours, I sat in silence making lists. People who had access to the apartment, the exact times Mark said he was at work, the schedule of Lauren's classes at the university where she worked part-time. I wasn't a detective. I was just a middle-aged woman with trembling hands and a lifetime of routines. But suddenly that routine was a weapon. I knew everyone's habits. I knew what time Mark's car left the driveway, what days Daniel called, what Lauren posted on social media. I could trace them without them ever knowing. I checked my phone, old texts, messages, photos. In one from 2 months ago, Lauren had written, "Thank you for trusting me with the spare key. It's so much easier to pick up Daniel's stuff on Tuesdays." Tuesdays. The word twisted like a knife. I remembered that day. How she'd come over with a pie, smiling, saying Daniel forgot some old boxes. How Mark had encouraged me to let her have the key, saying she was family now. And I'd smiled, feeling proud to be a generous mother-in-law. Fool. The realization came not like thunder, but like a slow, steady cut. They were all lying to me. Mark knew. Lauren came here because he let her, maybe even invited her. The thought didn't make me scream. It didn't make me throw anything. It just made me quiet. That night when Mark came home, I watched him the way you'd watch a stranger on a train. Curious, detached, studying his every move. He talked about work dinner plans, a possible trip to visit Daniel next month. He didn't notice that I barely spoke. "You're pale," he said finally. "You sure you're okay?" "Just tired," I replied. And for the first time in our marriage, the lie didn't taste bitter. It tasted necessary. After he went to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room. The city hummed outside, distant and uncaring. I looked at our wedding photo on the shelf. Mark's arm around me, both of us smiling like we believed life was unshakable. I felt nothing. No love, no hatred, just the hollow clarity of truth. It wasn't about revenge yet. Not fully. It was about reclaiming control of my own home, my own mind. They thought they could make me doubt myself, like I was some fragile woman losing touch with reality. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I wrote in my notebook, slowly, deliberately, keep pretending everything is fine. Gather proof, not emotion. Proof. Do not confront until ready. It was the first plan I'd made in years that was entirely for me. I went to bed at 2 a.m, my body exhausted but my mind sharp. As I lay beside Mark, his soft snoring filling the dark, I realized I was no longer afraid of him. Not of what he could do or say or hide. The fear had changed shape. It was now a kind of focused, precise calm waiting. When dawn came, I felt different. Not lighter, not happier, but solid. My heart still ached, but the ache had direction. I looked in the mirror at the lines around my eyes, the tired woman staring back. "You're not crazy," I whispered to her. "You're waking up." That day I deleted the video from my phone. At least that's what Mark would see if he checked. The real copy was safe. I even smiled at him over breakfast, asked about his meeting, kissed his cheek before he left. It was almost easy, this new role. The calm wife, the trusting woman. But underneath, a different version of me was growing. Quiet, calculating, determined. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him wasn't his wife anymore. She was the beginning of his reckoning. By the following week, my fear had turned into something else. Precision. I moved through my days as if rehearsing a performance. Every smile, every nod, every casual phrase was a line in a script only I knew. Mark didn't suspect a thing. He still kissed me on the cheek every morning before work. Still texted the same dull updates running late. "Don't wait for dinner." If he noticed my sudden quietness, he didn't show it. Maybe he thought I'd gone numb or that age was softening me into passivity. That was his mistake. Tuesday came again. I worked from home that day, pretending to have a mild cold. I set up the camera in the same place, but this time I added another. A tiny one hidden behind the bookshelf facing the hallway. Then I left the apartment at noon, locked the door, and drove around the block. My hands were trembling, but my mind was sharp. I parked near the cafe across the street and waited. For 40 minutes, nothing happened. Then, at 1:12 p.m., I saw her, Lauren. She arrived in her little white car wearing that same soft pink sweater she always wore when she wanted to look harmless. She walked into the building with a key, my key, dangling from her hand. It was one thing to watch it on video, another to see it with my own eyes. A sick wave rolled through me, disbelief, humiliation, fury, but beneath it all a strange satisfaction. Now it's real. I waited until she left 20 minutes later, then went back upstairs. My pulse was hammering as I unlocked the door. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, floral, synthetic, cloying. I checked the dresser again. Another envelope. This time I opened it. Inside was a photo old from maybe 10 years ago. Mark and Lauren at a family barbecue standing too close, his hand on her shoulder. I remembered that day. Daniel had been in the house fetching more drinks, and I'd thought nothing of their laughter. Now I looked at the photo and saw everything I'd missed. On the back, written in her neat round handwriting, "Some things never change." My breath caught. I sat down on the bed, the picture trembling in my fingers. This wasn't just an affair. This was a message. I took photos of the envelope, the handwriting, the time on my phone. Then I placed it all back exactly as I found it. If she wanted to play games, I'd let her. But I'd start keeping score. That evening, I visited my friend Susan. She worked at a small law office downtown, mostly handling estate cases. We'd met years ago through a book club, and though we weren't close anymore, I knew I could trust her to be discreet. Over tea, I told her everything, except the affair. I framed it as someone entering my home without permission. She frowned. "If you've got evidence, you can file a report. Unauthorized entry is a serious thing. Even if you gave them a key, if they're using it for something you didn't agree to." "Yes," she leaned forward. "But think carefully before you involve the police. Once it starts, you can't undo it." Her words stuck with me on the drive home. I didn't want the police. Not yet. This wasn't about the law. It was about truth. My truth. That night, Mark was home early, unusually attentive. He made dinner, poured wine, told me he'd been thinking we should take a weekend trip, just the two of us to reconnect. His timing was impeccable. I smiled, faintly nodding. That sounds nice. But inside, something twisted. Was this guilt or strategy? After he fell asleep, I opened his laptop. He was careless. Same password for everything. I found his email, scrolled through months of messages. Most were work-related, but then I saw one labeled private. My heart pounded as I clicked. It was a draft unsent L. "I think we should slow down. She's starting to notice things. Last Tuesday was too risky. Let me handle it. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the screen blurred. Lauren. He hadn't sent it, but he had written it. He had thought it. That was enough. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the glowing screen the man I'd shared my life with reflected in the dark window beside it. My body felt hollow, as if every organ had turned to glass. Then something inside me hardened, a slow, deliberate shift. I copied the draft, emailed it to myself from an anonymous account, and deleted every trace. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The world outside looked clearer, somehow sharper. I made coffee, fed. The cat smiled at Mark when he came into the kitchen. "You seem better today," he said. "I am," I replied. "I think I just needed some rest." He kissed me, picked up his briefcase, and left. The moment the door clicked shut, I felt an almost electric stillness. This was the first morning I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the one in control. I spent the next hours gathering everything: the videos, the emails, timestamps, screenshots, even the photo from the envelope. I created a folder on a new USB drive and labeled it Proof. Then I locked it inside a small metal box under the sink behind cleaning supplies. By noon, I was ready for my next move. I called Daniel. He sounded distracted, impatient. "Hey, Mom, I'm at work. Can we talk later? It's about Lauren," I said softly. Silence. "What about her? She's been visiting the apartment while I'm gone." "That's weird. Why would she do that?" His tone was uneasy, defensive. I almost pitied him. "That's what I'd like to know." He sighed. "Mom, I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe she wanted to surprise you, help with something. Maybe I said, 'You ask her.'" Then we hung up, and I sat back staring at my reflection in the black TV screen. For the first time, I saw someone else staring back. Someone who wasn't frightened or broken. Someone who had a plan. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold yet, but I knew this much. They had played their game long enough. Now it was my turn. I began with small, deliberate moves, the kind that no one would notice unless they looked very closely. I changed the locks first quietly without mentioning it to Mark. The locksmith came while he was at work, and I told him it was a security concern, nothing more. When Mark got home that evening, he tried his key, frowned when it didn't fit, and looked at me. "Oh," I said lightly. "I forgot to tell you. There was a problem with the old lock. The building manager recommended replacing it." I smiled as if it were the most trivial thing in the world. He hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "You should have told me." "You were busy," I replied, setting the table. That night I slept without fear. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe in my own home. But safety was temporary. I knew that this was only the first step. The next day I went to the bank. My hands trembled slightly as I requested access to our joint accounts. The woman behind the counter typed briskly, her nails clattering against the keyboard. "You've got 2 checking accounts and 1 savings. Anything specific you'd like to do today?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to close the joint account and transfer my share into a personal one." She blinked. "Do you have your husband's authorization?" "No," I said calmly. "And I don't need it. I'm withdrawing only what's legally mine." My voice didn't shake. It was the first time in 23 years I had spoken without asking permission. By the time I left, I had a new debit card in my purse and a bank statement with only my name on it. That paper felt heavier than gold. When I got home, the apartment felt different, charged like the air before a storm. There was an envelope on the counter, no return address. I opened it with a kitchen knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Stop this. You don't know what you're doing." My hands went cold. I looked around the room, half expecting to see someone watching me, but the apartment was empty, silent. Then I noticed the paper smelled faintly of perfume. Her perfume. Lauren's. I sat down, gripping the note until the edges dug into my skin. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. She knew I was moving, and she wanted me to stop. That evening, I said nothing to Mark. I cooked dinner as usual, smiled when he made small talk, laughed at a joke I didn't hear. But inside, I was memorizing every expression, every word, every glance he gave me. When he went to bed, I checked his phone. He'd changed the passcode. The next morning, Lauren called me. Her tone was sweet, almost mocking. "Emily, hi. I just wanted to check if you got my little gift. I left something on the counter." I said nothing. "Emily, yes. I finally said I got it." "Oh, good," she purred. I was worried it might get lost. "Anyway, we should have coffee sometime, just the 2 of us. Clear the air." Sure, I said, my voice even. Let's do that. We met at a cafe the next day. She arrived looking flawless. Hair, perfect dress, pressed lipstick, immaculate. She looked like the picture of innocence, but her eyes told a different story. Emily, she said, sitting down. I feel like there's tension between us. I don't want that. We're family. I stirred my coffee slowly. You've been in my home without permission. Multiple times. She smiled faintly. Oh, come on. You gave me a key to help Daniel. I said not to sneak around when I'm gone. Her smile widened. Sneak around. That's such an ugly phrase. Maybe you're just imagining things. I leaned forward, my voice calm, controlled. I saw you, Lauren. On camera. For the first time, her smile faltered. A small crack, but it was enough. She blinked, looked away briefly, then back. Then you should delete it, she said softly. For your own good. I met her gaze. I already did. She studied me, searching for weakness. When she found none, she picked up her bag and stood. You're making a mistake, she said. You don't know who you're dealing with. Neither do you, I replied. She left without another word. That night I found Mark waiting for me in the living room. The lights were dim, his face unreadable. Lauren called me, he said. What the hell are you doing? Protecting myself, I said quietly. He stood up, his voice rising. From what? From your own imagination. From the truth, I said. He stepped closer, his jaw tight. You're losing it, Emily. You need help. I almost laughed. You mean help forgetting, help pretending you haven't been lying to me? His eyes hardened. You're making a mess you can't clean up. Then stop me. For a moment I thought he might, but instead he turned, grabbed his coat, and slammed the door behind him. When the silence settled, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was weak, but because I knew what came next. They would regroup, plan come back stronger. But I was ready. The next morning I called Susan again. I need a consultation, I said. About property separation. Are you sure, she asked. Completely. That weekend I drove to the coast alone. I rented a small cottage, brought my laptop, my notes, my proof. I spent 2 days there in total silence, walking along the shore, listening to the waves, sorting through everything I had gathered. It was the first peace I'd felt in months. By the time I drove home, my plan was clear. No more hesitation, no more fear. They had played their games in the dark. Now I would bring everything into the light. 3 days after Mark stormed out, he came back, calm, polite, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He placed them in a vase without asking where we stood, without mentioning the argument, as if the air between us hadn't turned poisonous. I thought we could talk, he said, his tone carefully neutral, about everything. All right, I said, motioning for him to sit. He did his movements slow, cautious, the way you'd approach an animal you once owned but weren't sure would bite now. He started softly. Emily, I know things have been tense. I should have been more patient with you. I waited. You've been under a lot of stress, and maybe Mrs. Caldwell's gossip made things worse, but I want us to move past it. Together. I looked at him, at his perfectly rehearsed expression, contrition painted over calculation. Is that what Lauren told you to say? The briefest flicker crossed his face. Surprise, then irritation. Lauren doesn't control what I say. She controlled everything else. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You're making this into something it isn't. No, I said quietly. I'm finally making it into what it is. He sat back, exhaled, forced a laugh. You've always had an imagination. You used to write stories, remember? Maybe you've just stopped, I interrupted. You don't get to rewrite this one. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The lilies between us filled the silence with their cloying scent. Finally, he stood up. You want space, fine, but don't make me the villain in your fantasy. As he left, I thought, too late. That evening, Lauren called. Her voice was bright. Too bright. Emily, I'm so glad Mark talked to you. I think it's time we all had dinner together like a family. Let's not let misunderstandings ruin everything. Dinner sounds nice, I said. When tomorrow our place 700. Perfect, I said, and hung up. The next day I arrived exactly on time. Lauren opened the door in a soft blue dress, barefoot, holding a glass of wine. I'm so happy you came, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and deceit. Mark was already there, pouring drinks, smiling like a man determined to erase history. Daniel was too, nervous, fidgeting, unaware he was sitting in a nest of vipers. Dinner was civil at first. The conversation danced around neutral topics, weather, work, Daniel's promotion. Then Lauren leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. You know, Emily, I've been thinking about that whole camera situation. It must have been such a misunderstanding. Maybe one of the cleaners. I didn't hire a cleaner, I said softly. Her smile didn't falter. Right. I mean, maybe Mark said quickly, glancing at me, then her. Then maybe someone else had a copy of the key, she offered sweetly. I set down my fork. Maybe someone did. The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Daniel looked from one face to another, confusion in his eyes. What are we talking about? Nothing, Mark said sharply. Something, I corrected. Lauren stood up, forcing a laugh. You know what, I think we're all just tired. Emily, let's not dig up the past. The past keeps digging itself up, I said. Every Tuesday, to be exact. Her smile froze. Mark's voice hardened. Enough. I looked at him. You want enough? Then tell him. I gestured toward Daniel. Tell your son who you really are, or I will. Mark's face drained of color. Lauren's hand flew to his arm, gripping it. Emily, she whispered. You don't want to do this. Think of your family. My family, I said. You mean the one you've been dismantling piece by piece? Daniel stood abruptly. What the hell is going on? Mark turned to him, his tone desperate. It's not what she thinks, Lauren added quickly. She's been under stress. She's imagining things. You know how she gets, I laughed. A short, sharp sound that made them both flinch. You should have deleted that email, Mark. The one you wrote to her. Elle, I think we should slow down. Remember, Lauren's hand slipped from his arm. Daniel's eyes widened. Dad Mark's lips moved, but no words came out. I stood. Enjoy your dinner. I left before they could stop me. My hands shook, but I felt strangely calm, like someone who had just finished the hardest part of a long climb. Outside, the night air was cold, the stars sharp above the rooftops. I breathed deeply, feeling something close to power. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark, letting the silence settle. I thought about what I'd seen. Their faces, their fear. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first sign of cracks. Over the next few days, they didn't contact me. Not a word. It was almost peaceful. I used the time to gather everything. Printed copies of emails, text messages, even financial records showing withdrawals from our joint account to a mysterious consultant that turned out to be Lauren's cousin. Every document went into a folder marked for Susan. By the end of the week, I had a complete picture, not just of the affair, but of the manipulation, the slow erosion of my finances, the lies, the false sympathy. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They had been dismantling my life while smiling to my face. One night as I sat at my desk reviewing the papers, I realized how quiet I felt. Not numb, not bitter, just clear. The kind of calm that comes after a long storm when you finally understand its shape. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was noisy, and I needed silence to win. When Mark finally texted, "We need to talk," I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "Not yet." He called, but I didn't answer. Lauren tried too. I let the phone ring, each vibration a reminder that they were the ones chasing now. They wanted me back in their web. They wanted the old Emily, confused, emotional, forgiving. But she was gone, and what had replaced her was colder, stronger, patient. The woman they'd underestimated was about to become the one thing they feared most, someone who had nothing left to lose. The silence after exposure was almost unbearable. A week passed without a single knock on my door. No calls from Mark, no texts from Lauren. Even Daniel had gone quiet. At first I thought I wanted peace, but peace, I learned, can feel like isolation when you've been living inside chaos. I spent long hours walking the neighborhood headphones and pretending to listen to music, but really just listening to the sound of my own thoughts. On one of those walks I saw her, Mrs. Caldwell, standing by the mailboxes, her sharp eyes scanning the hallway. "Emily," she said with that peculiar mix of warmth and judgment that only elderly women seem to master, "I was beginning to wonder if you'd moved away." "Not yet," I replied with a small smile. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I heard there was a bit of drama. Word travels fast." "It always does," she replied. "But don't let them make you the villain, dear. People like them." She paused, glancing down the hall. "They're good at wearing masks. You're not the first woman in this building who's been made to feel crazy." Her tone shifted, softening just slightly. "Come by for tea sometime. I make a mean lemon cake." For the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected. Connection. 2 days later, I did go. Her apartment smelled like old wood and jasmine. She poured tea, served the cake, and listened. Not the polite kind of listening, but the quiet, still kind that comes from someone who has known her own version of betrayal. My husband, she said at one point, used to disappear every Thursday, claimed it was poker night. Turned out it was his secretary. I smiled faintly. What did you do? I let him play his game, she said, her voice cool. Then I made sure the cards were marked. We both laughed, a low, knowing sound. When I left her apartment, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't forgiveness or closure. It was strength. She reminded me that I wasn't alone, that women like us survive by watching, by waiting, by knowing when to strike. That night I slept soundly for the first time in months. The following afternoon, just as I was about to leave for groceries, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Mark stood there holding a bottle of wine. Lauren was beside him, smiling too sweetly. My stomach tightened. What do you want to talk? Mark answered. Just talk. Lauren nodded. We all said things we regret. Maybe it's time to move forward. Their voices were soft, conciliatory, the same melody predators use when they're too tired to chase. All right, I replied, stepping aside. Come in. They sat at the dining table like actors in a poorly written play. Mark poured wine into 3 glasses, handed me one. I didn't touch it. Lauren started. Emily, I know you've been hurt. We both made mistakes, but destroying this family won't make you feel better. I tilted my head. Destroying this family, I'm not the one who started digging. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. We can fix this. We just need to trust each other again. I laughed softly. Trust you mean the kind that disappears every Tuesday? He looked up sharply. Enough. Lauren's eyes flashed, but she quickly masked it with a smile. Please, Emily, let's be adults about this. You can't keep holding on to resentment. It'll eat you alive. Her words were so perfectly rehearsed that for a second I almost admired the effort. Resentment, I said. No, I call it memory. Lauren's jaw tightened. You don't know everything. Then enlighten me. Mark stood his tone, turning firm. Emily, listen. We all made mistakes. You can't punish everyone forever. I rose too, my voice cold, deliberate. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. Lauren's facade cracked. You think you can just erase us? Make us disappear? I smiled faintly. No, Lauren. You'll do that yourself. Mark slammed his glass onto the table. This is insane. The wine splashed across the white lilies in the vase. The same kind he'd brought days ago. Red on white. It looked almost symbolic. Maybe, I said. But at least I'm insane with evidence. Lauren grabbed her bag, her face pale. You'll regret this, she hissed. I already regret knowing you, I replied. They left without another word, the sound of the door closing behind them echoing like a gunshot. When the silence returned, I felt my heartbeat slow. There was fear, yes, but it was a clean fear, sharp and bracing. It didn't weaken me. It steadied me. Later that evening, I walked to Mrs. Caldwell's again. She didn't ask questions, just handed me tea and let me sit. You look like you've seen ghosts, she observed. I did, I whispered. And they were alive. She chuckled softly. Then it's time to bury them. That night I opened my notebook and began to write again. Not lists this time, but statements. Clear, factual, indisputable. Dates, actions, conversations. I started building a record not just for the lawyers, but for myself. A map of how far I had come and how far I was willing to go. For the first time, the act of writing didn't feel like desperation. It felt like purification. Each word took away a little of their power, returned it to me. By midnight, I closed the notebook and whispered to the empty room. They think I'm scared. The apartment seemed to hum in response, quiet and steady. I'm not scared, I said again, louder. And for the first time, I believed it. It happened on a Thursday. The day started like any other. Gray sky, faint drizzle, the city moving in its quiet rhythm. I woke early, made coffee, and stood by the window watching the streetlights fade. There was something electric in the air, something inevitable. I didn't plan what would happen that day, but maybe it had been building toward this all along. By noon, I had a call from Susan. I filed the initial motion, she informed me. They'll be served next week. Thank you, I replied. My voice was steady, detached. Emily, she added gently, once this starts, you can't go back. I don't want to. I hung up and looked around the apartment, the place that had held both my worst humiliation and my rebirth. Everything was in order. The cameras were gone. The proof was hidden. I was ready. At 3 p.m., there was a knock. Not polite, not hesitant. Firm, deliberate. I opened the door. Mark stood there, his face pale, jaw tight. Lauren was behind him, eyes red from crying or pretending to. "Can we come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. "Of course. It's been a while since Tuesday." He didn't answer. They sat on the couch, looking smaller than I remembered them. Mark cleared his throat. "Susan called me. She told me about the petition." "Good," I responded. "That saves me the trouble." Emily Lauren began. "This is going too far. Divorce legal action." "What are you trying to prove that actions have consequences?" Mark leaned forward. "You're ruining everything. The house, the finances. Daniel will never forgive you." I smiled slightly. "Daniel already knows." They froze. "I told him yesterday," I continued. "He didn't believe me at first, but he will. He'll see the emails, the recordings. He'll see what kind of people you both are." Lauren's composure cracked. "You wouldn't." "I already did." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Mark desperate, but he was staring at me with something that wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "The truth," I said simply. "Say it. Right here, right now." He hesitated, his face hardening. "It's over, Emily. There's no point. Say it." "Fine," he snapped. "Yes, I was with her. It happened." "All right. It wasn't supposed to." Lauren interrupted, her voice trembling. "Don't do this, Mark." He turned to her. "Don't lie again, pretend this didn't happen. You promised—" "I promised a lot of things," he said bitterly. None of them worked. I watched in silence. There it was, the confession, raw and ugly, the two of them unraveling under the weight of their own words. Lauren stood up, suddenly pacing. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said, turning to me. "You think this makes you better? You were never enough for him, Emily. That's why he came to me." I didn't flinch. "Then why are you shaking?" She froze. Her hand still holding her wineglass trembled. "Because you've turned this into a nightmare," she shouted. "You won't let it go. You're obsessed." Maybe I said softly, "But at least I don't need to lie to breathe." Mark slammed his hand against the table. "Stop it, both of you." His voice cracked. "You've turned this into hell." I looked at him, calm as ice. "No, Mark. You did that years ago. I just turned on the lights." He stared at me, eyes wild, like a man realizing he was already trapped. "You think anyone will believe you?" "They don't have to," I said. "The evidence speaks for itself." Lauren's voice dropped to a whisper. "You'll regret this, Emily. You don't know how cruel I can be." "Oh, I do," I countered. "I've watched you practice." She went silent. Mark rubbed his face, his voice low, exhausted. "You've destroyed everything." I stood. "No, I destroyed the illusion. There's a difference." The rain outside began to pour harder, a steady, relentless sound against the windows. For a moment, none of us spoke. The storm outside felt like an echo of the one inside this room. Unstoppable. Cleansing. Finally, Lauren grabbed her purse. "Come on, Mark. She's insane." He didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on me. "You planned all this?" "Yes," I admitted, "and that's why it worked." He stood slowly, his shoulders sagging. "You'll be alone, Emily. You'll end up with nothing." I looked him in the eye. "Nothing is better than living in your lie." They left together, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet that followed. It wasn't peace exactly, more like aftermath, the kind that comes after a storm when the air is still thick, charged with what's been broken. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt empty. But it was a clean, pure emptiness, like the space left behind after you throw something toxic away. Later that evening, Daniel called. His voice was soft, confused. "Mom, I talked to Dad and he admitted it. All of it. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," I advised. "Just live your life differently than he did." There was a long pause. Then quietly, "I'm proud of you." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time staring at the rain-streaked window. My reflection stared back. Calm, unflinching, unfamiliar. For the first time, I realized what victory looked like. Not joy, not relief, just the absence of fear. The masks were gone. The truth was out. And what was left was mine. The court hearing came faster than anyone expected. Mark had tried to delay it, his lawyer filing motion after motion to stall, to intimidate. But Susan was better, quiet, sharp, and utterly ruthless. She prepared every document, every timestamp, every photograph. I didn't even need to speak much. The evidence spoke for me. When the day came, I dressed simply. Black suit hair, pulled back, no jewelry. I wanted to look like the truth itself. Calm, unadorned, undeniable. Lauren sat 2 rows behind Mark, pretending she wasn't there for him. She wore a gray dress, her face carefully composed, her hands twisting the hem of her sleeve. But her eyes betrayed her, darting anxious brittle. Mark's lawyer spoke first, painting him as a victim of emotional instability. He said I had become paranoid, that my imaginations had turned destructive. I sat still, eyes forward, every breath measured. Then Susan stood. "Mrs. Grant, would you please describe what you found on your home security camera?" I did calmly. "Precisely. No embellishment. Did you ever give your daughter-in-law permission to enter your home when you were away?" "No." "Did you confront her?" "And her response?" "She told me I was imagining things." Susan handed the judge the printed screenshots. "These are time-stamped videos from the defendant's home. They clearly show the same individual entering her residence multiple times without consent." Mark's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. The images were irrefutable. When it was Mark's turn to testify, he avoided my eyes. He spoke of misunderstandings, of temporary lapses of regret. But the words sounded hollow, practiced. When Susan cross-examined him, she asked, "Did you ever write this email?" and placed the printed copy of his unsent draft on the table. He stared at it for a long time, then said quietly, "Yes." Lauren looked down, her face drained of color. By the time it was over, the court ruled in my favor. Full ownership of the apartment, half of all joint assets, and a legal restriction preventing either of them from contacting me again. Mark's lawyer muttered something about appeals, but even he knew it was pointless. Outside reporters from a local news outlet had gathered curious about the suburban betrayal case. I ignored them. I walked past Mark and Lauren without a glance. They stood together on the courthouse steps, defeated, small, stripped of the arrogance that had once defined them. For a brief moment, I almost pitied them. Then I remembered the envelope in my drawer, the smell of Lauren's perfume in my home, the sound of Mark calling me crazy. The pity died before it could take shape. That night I opened a bottle of wine, the one I'd saved since our 20th anniversary. I poured a glass, sat by the window, and let the city lights blur through the glass. The victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath unfolded like slow theater. Mark moved into a rented apartment across town. The company where he worked discovered he had been misusing funds. Small amounts, but enough to make them look closer. Within a month, he was forced to resign. Lauren's world collapsed even faster. Word spread not about the affair, but about the emails, the secret entries, the manipulation. She lost her teaching job at the university after someone forwarded the video to the department head. The scandal wasn't public, but it didn't need to be. Academia thrives on quiet destruction. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't have to. Truth once released moves on its own. One afternoon I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Marks, Emily, I hope you're satisfied. You've taken everything. I'm living in a motel now. Daniel won't return my calls. Lauren's gone. I don't even blame you anymore. You were right about everything. I just didn't think you'd go this far. I suppose you won." I folded the letter neatly and slid it into the drawer. I didn't need to reply. The following weekend, Daniel visited. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the whole ordeal had aged him overnight. He hugged me for a long time. "I don't know how you did it," he said quietly. I stopped pretending, I replied. He nodded. "He's moving to Florida. Said he wants a fresh start. Good for him. And Lauren, she made her choices." He studied me for a moment. "You're different now. I'm free," I corrected. He smiled sadly. "That's the same thing, I guess." After he left, I sat in the quiet apartment, the late afternoon sun pouring in through the windows. Everything looked the same walls, the same furniture, but it all felt new. It was mine again. Later, I walked down to the lobby to check my mail. Mrs. Caldwell was there, of course. She looked me over with a small, knowing smile. So she said, "You finally cleaned house?" I smiled faintly. "Something like that." She leaned closer. "Good. They never expect women like us to win." I laughed softly. "Then they should start learning." When I returned upstairs, I looked out over the city again. The lights flickered on, one by one, steady and quiet. I thought about the person I'd been just months ago, frightened, uncertain, apologizing for existing. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, stronger. It wasn't happiness I felt. It was justice. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, only silence. Mark and Lauren had built their world on lies. I had torn it down with truth, and the ruins suited them perfectly. It's strange how silence changes shape. Months ago it was heavy, suffocating. Now it feels light, deliberate, chosen. The world hasn't changed. I have. It's been almost half a year since the trial. The days have found rhythm again. Not joy, but peace. I wake early, open the curtains, and let the morning light spill across the kitchen floor. The apartment feels different now, as if it finally recognizes me as its rightful owner. I've started teaching writing classes at the local community center. It began as something small, a volunteer program for women rebuilding their lives. Some of them come from divorce, some from loss, others from silence deeper than mine. I never tell them my full story. I don't need to. They see it in the way I listen, in the steadiness of my voice. On Tuesdays, I still make coffee around when Huzzier's a quiet ritual. Sometimes I catch myself glancing toward the door out of habit, but no one comes anymore. The locks have been changed, the ghosts exorcised. Tuesday has become just another day. Daniel visits more often now. He brings me photos of his new apartment, stories about his coworkers, and sometimes just silence. We sit together without needing to fill it. The wound between us has become a scar, visible, but healed. He doesn't talk about his father much. The last I heard, Mark sold what was left of his car and moved down to Florida, a small town near the coast. He sends the occasional email, polite, detached. I read them, then archive them without replying. I don't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy, and I've given him enough of mine already. Lauren, I hear, is still in town. She works part-time at a real estate office. Or maybe she doesn't anymore. Rumors blur with time. Once I saw her from across the street. She looked thinner, older. Her posture had changed, shoulders drawn inward like someone perpetually bracing for impact. Our eyes met for a second. She froze, then looked away. I didn't. I just watched her walk past, hurried, tense, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just a quiet recognition. Some debts repay themselves. Mrs. Caldwell still greets me in the hallway, though her steps are slower now. We share small exchanges. Weather neighbors, the endless repairs this building always seems to need. Sometimes she gives me her knowing smile, the kind that says she remembers everything but doesn't need to say it aloud. Life has grown smaller, simpler. I tend to plants on the windowsill. I read before bed. I walk by the lake on weekends. There's a peace in ordinariness, something I once thought I'd never want again. But every so often I'll catch my reflection in the glass in the mirror, the shop window, the darkened TV screen, and I barely recognize her. The woman staring back isn't afraid or fragile or waiting for someone else to tell her what's true. Her eyes are steady, her mouth calm. Freedom, I've learned, doesn't look like celebration. It looks like stillness. One evening I drove out to the edge of the city, to the same spot where Mark and I used to stop on road trips, a quiet overlook above the river. The place hadn't changed much. Same wooden railing, same hum of traffic below. I stood there for a while, the wind tugging at my hair, the sky deepening into gold. For the first time, I let myself think about everything. Not the pain, but the journey through it. How it began with a single question in a hallway. How that question had unstitched an entire life. Do you know who comes to your apartment every Tuesday? I smiled at the memory, not bitterly, but with a strange gratitude. That sentence had burned my world down. Yes, but it also built the one I live in now. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the river in amber and shadow. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The air smelled of rain and distant pine. When I opened my eyes, the sky had turned violet. The city lights flickered on one by one. Tiny constellations, each steady and small. On the drive home from the overlook, I passed the old cafe where Lauren and I once sat, where she'd smiled and told me I was imagining things. The sign was gone, the windows boarded. The building had been sold. For a moment I thought about stopping, but I didn't. Some places deserve to stay closed. At home I poured myself tea and sat by the window. The city outside was quiet, calm. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender. I took my notebook from the drawer, the same one I'd filled during those dark months. I flipped to the last page, the one still blank, and for the first time I knew exactly what to write. Tuesday, 6:47 p.m. No visitors, no ghosts, just me. I closed the notebook, feeling the faint tremor of finality. Down in the courtyard, I saw Mrs. Caldwell locking her mailbox. She looked up, spotted me, and gave a small nod. I returned it, smiling faintly. The world kept moving. Buses, footsteps, the quiet hum of living. And in that motion I found my peace. The war was over. They had lost everything that made them who they were. Control, image, illusion. And I had lost only what never truly belonged to me. No happy ending, no tragedy either. Just truth. Clean, sharp, and final. The kind that doesn't fade with time. The kind you build a new life on. Spring came suddenly that year. The city transformed overnight, trees, budding birds, returning people emerging from winter hibernation with cautious smiles. I found myself waking earlier, staying outside longer. My body remembered joy before my mind did. On the first truly warm Saturday, I cleared out Mark's remaining belongings. His old records, the fishing gear he never used, law school textbooks he kept for appearances. I boxed everything neatly, labeled each container in my precise handwriting, and called a donation service. When the truck came, I felt lighter with each item that left. The apartment grew more spacious, more mine. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from Daniel. "Can I bring someone to dinner next week?" My heart quickened. "Yes, of course," I replied. His response came immediately. "Thanks, Mom. She's important to me. I want you to meet her. A girlfriend." Something expanded in my chest, not quite happiness, but possibility. A future unfolding in unexpected directions. I spent the rest of the weekend planning the menu, rearranging furniture, choosing wine. Normal activities that suddenly felt profound. Daniel arrived on Thursday evening, holding hands with a woman named Eliza. She was older than I expected, maybe 35, with cropped dark hair and quick, intelligent eyes. A professor of sociology at the university. Nothing like Lauren. No calculated sweetness, no performance. She asked direct questions, laughed freely, touched Daniel's arm with casual intimacy. "You have a lovely home," Eliza remarked, studying the paintings on my walls. "Did you do these?" I nodded. "In another lifetime." "You should pick it up again," she suggested. "There's something about the way you see color." Later, while Daniel was taking a call from work, Eliza leaned forward across the table. He told me everything she said quietly. "About Mark, Lauren, what happened. I want you to know I admire how you handled it. Not everyone finds their strength when they need it. I wasn't looking for strength, I admitted. Just truth." She nodded slowly. "Same thing sometimes." After they left the apartment, held their presence like a lingering perfume. Daniel's renewed energy, Eliza's directness. I walked through each room, touching surfaces, feeling the difference. The space was changing again, not just emptying of the past, but filling with something else. My son was healing, life was continuing, and I was part of it again. The next morning, I registered for an advanced painting workshop at the art center downtown. The class would start in 2 weeks. I hadn't touched a brush in years, not seriously. My hands felt clumsy, just completing the online form. But when I clicked submit, something settled in me, a decision made, a direction chosen. That Sunday, a letter arrived with Florida postage. Mark's handwriting on the envelope. I held it for a long time before opening it, weighing the past in my hands. Inside was a check for $30,000 and a brief note, Emily. "This doesn't make anything right." Nothing could. "But it's from the sale of the boat. Your half. I should have sold it years ago when you asked. I hope you're doing well. I'm sober now. 90 days. For what it's worth, Em." I stared at the check, this unexpected ghost from our shared life. The boat had been an extravagance purchased when Mark made partner. I'd hated it, the expense, the weekends lost to maintenance, the friends Mark entertained on board who never quite looked me in the eye. Now here it was, transformed into possibility. I deposited the check the next day, not because I needed it or wanted anything from Mark, but because taking what was rightfully mine had become an act of self-respect. I allocated the money immediately, half to a retirement account, a quarter to Daniel for his student loans, and the rest for art supplies. Expensive ones. The kind I'd always told myself were for real artists. The painting workshop started on a rainy Tuesday morning. 12 students gathered in a high-ceilinged studio, folding easels assembled in a circle. I arrived early, chosen my spot carefully back to the wall near a north-facing window. The instructor, Vivian, was a tall woman in her 60s with silver hair and paint-stained hands. "Today we're going to talk about perspective," she announced. "Not just the technical kind, vanishing points, horizons, but emotional perspective. How your feelings change what you see and how you present it. She walked around the circle, studying each of us. Painting isn't reproduction, she continued. It's interpretation. The way you interpret will tell me more about you than any biography. For our first exercise, we each received a photograph of the same empty room, a spare interior with a single chair, a window, bare walls. We were told to paint it as if we'd just experienced the greatest loss of our lives. I stared at the photograph brush suspended. The room in the image could have been from anywhere. A waiting area, a hospital, an empty apartment after someone has moved out. But as I began to paint, it transformed. The shadows deepened. The window glowed with an almost painful brightness. The chair became a presence, holding the shape of someone who had just stood up and walked away forever. When Vivian came to my easel, she paused longer than she had with others. "You've been here," she said softly. "In this place. Not physically, but emotionally." I nodded, unable to speak. "Good," she continued. "Use it, but don't let it use you." For the second exercise, we painted the same room as if we'd just been given unexpected freedom. My brush moved differently now, colors bleeding into each other, light spilling across surfaces, the chair pushed slightly askew as if someone had just risen with sudden purpose. When we displayed our work side by side, the contrast startled me. Same room, same painter, entirely different worlds. As the weeks passed, painting became a form of exorcism. Each brushstroke pulled something from inside me, anger, grief, confusion, and fixed it outside where I could examine it properly. I painted Mark as I remembered him on our wedding day, young and nervous. I painted Lauren at that barbecue years ago, her eyes already watching him when she thought no one was looking. I painted Mrs. Caldwell regal and knowing. Daniel and Eliza, their hands entwined. And finally, I painted myself. Not as I'd been, but as I was becoming a woman standing in an open doorway, face half in shadow, half in light, looking outward toward something only she could see. Vivian selected that painting for the student exhibition. The night of the opening, the gallery buzzed with conversation, wine glasses clinked, strangers studied my work with thoughtful expressions. Daniel and Eliza came bringing flowers. Even Susan attended, looking different outside her law office, softer, more approachable. She stood before my self-portrait for a long time. "You captured it perfectly," she remarked finally. That moment when you realized the door was never locked from the outside. As the evening wound down, a man approached, tall, bearded, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "My name's Thomas," he introduced himself. "I'm the curator here. I've been watching your progress throughout the workshop. You have a unique perspective." "Thank you," I replied, uncomfortable with the attention, but trying not to show it. "We're planning a small group show for fall," he continued. "Transformations is the working title. I'd like to include your work if you're interested." I blinked, certain I'd misunderstood. "Me, in an actual gallery show?" He smiled at my surprise. "Yes, you. Think about it. No pressure." He handed me his card and moved away to speak with other guests. I stood there, turning the small rectangle of paper in my fingers, feeling something I hadn't expected, not just pride or excitement, but terror. Pure electric terror. The kind that comes when a door opens and you suddenly realize you might actually walk through it. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I called Mrs. Caldwell. I'd never phoned her before, but somehow it felt right to share this with her first. She listened as I described the exhibition, the curator's offer, my conflicting emotions. "Of course you're frightened," she said when I finished. "Freedom is terrifying. That's how you know it's real. But what if I fail? I'm not a real artist. I'm just a woman who what?" she interrupted. "Who survived? Who rebuilt? Who sees the world differently because of what happened to her? Sounds like an artist to me." After we hung up, I stood at my window watching the city lights blink against the darkness. Cars moved along distant streets, tiny and purposeful. Lives in motion, each following their own invisible maps. I thought about the word transformation, how it suggested not just change, but emergence. A butterfly isn't just a caterpillar with wings. It's a completely different creature. I agreed to the exhibition the next morning. Thomas seemed pleased but unsurprised, as if he'd known what my answer would be before I did. We set up a schedule: 5 new paintings needed by September, specific dimensions, thematic elements. A real assignment with deadlines and expectations. I bought a planner, marked the dates in red ink, and hung it beside my easel. Summer unfolded with unexpected intensity. The days grew longer, hotter. I developed a routine painting in the mornings when the light was best, teaching my writing classes at the community center in the afternoons, evenings for reading or walks by the lake. Sometimes Daniel and Eliza joined me for dinner. Occasionally, I met Susan for coffee. Mrs. Caldwell and I tended to the building's small garden together, deadheading roses and gossiping about neighbors. Ordinary life extraordinary in its simplicity. I was learning how to exist without crisis, without the adrenaline of betrayal and revenge. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes I'd wake from dreams where I was still married, still deceived, still half asleep in my own life. But those mornings grew fewer, the dreams less vivid. In July, an email arrived from Lauren. The subject line read simply, "Apology." My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. The message was brief. "Emily, I'm in therapy now. My counselor suggested I make amends where possible. I know sorry doesn't begin to cover what happened, but I am. Deeply sorry. Not just for the affair, but for making you doubt yourself, for invading your home, for treating you as if your feelings didn't matter. I was selfish and cruel. You deserved better. We all did. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did." Lauren. I read it 3 times, searching for manipulation, for hidden agendas. Found none. Just simple belated honesty. I didn't reply. Not out of anger or spite, but because there was nothing to say. Her apology wasn't a question that required an answer. It was a period at the end of a sentence we'd both finished writing. August brought a heat wave that left the city gasping. I set up a small portable air conditioner in my studio corner and painted through the worst of it, curtains drawn against the glare. The paintings for the exhibition were taking shape, each capturing a moment of transformation. A chrysalis splitting open. A key turning in a rusted lock. A woman standing at a crossroads, multiple shadows stretching behind her, only one path forward lit by sun. It was during this blazing creative period that I received the text from Daniel. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you meet tomorrow?" Something in the phrasing sent a chill through me despite the heat. We arranged to meet at a cafe near his office. I arrived early, ordered iced tea, waited with my heart fluttering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When Daniel walked in, his face told me everything before he spoke. Drawn pale, a tightness around his mouth that reminded me painfully of Mark. He sat across from me, hands clasped on the table. "Eliza and I split up," he announced without preamble. "Oh, Daniel, I'm so sorry." "What happened?" He looked down at his hands. "She said I have trust issues, that I keep waiting for her to betray me." His words hit me like physical blows. My throat constricted. "Because of what happened with your father?" "With Lauren." He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "She said she couldn't build a relationship with someone who's always checking her phone, questioning her whereabouts, doubting her word." "Is she right?" I asked gently. He looked up, then his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yes. I didn't even realize I was doing it until she pointed it out. I've become suspicious of everyone." The weight of understanding settled over me. This was the true collateral damage, not just my marriage, not just Mark's career or Lauren's reputation, but my son's ability to trust, to love without fear. "I'm seeing someone," he continued. "A therapist, I mean. She specializes in trauma." "That's good," I assured him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "That's really good. I just keep thinking," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "What if I end up like Dad? What if I'm hardwired to destroy good things?" "Listen to me," I said, leaning forward, waiting until his eyes met mine. "You are not your father. The very fact that you're worried about this, that you're getting help, that you can see the pattern proves it. Your father never once questioned himself. Not once in 23 years. How do you know that?" he asked. "How can you be sure?" "Because I was there," I replied simply. "And because you're sitting here now asking these questions. That's the difference. That's everything." After he left, I remained at the cafe, ordering a second tea, then a third, watching people pass on the sidewalk outside. Couples holding hands. Parents with strollers. Office workers hurrying back from late lunches. All these lives, all these stories I would never know. I thought about my paintings waiting at home, about transformation and its costs, about how healing isn't linear. It doubles back sidesteps, sometimes retreats entirely before inching forward again. Daniel's pain was part of my story now, another ripple expanding from that initial stone dropped in still water. How far would the circles reach? How long would they continue? When I finally returned home, the apartment felt different, heavier, somehow more saturated with meaning. I went straight to my easel and started a new canvas. Not one of the planned exhibition pieces, but something else. A father and son sitting at a table, a chasm of silence between them. Behind them, a window showing a storm. Above them, a ceiling beginning to crack. But their hands reaching across the table were painted in warm, light fingers, almost touching. Not quite connected, but trying. I worked through the night, forgetting time, forgetting myself. When dawn broke, I stood back, brush still in hand, and knew it was the best thing I'd ever created. Not technically perfect, some proportions slightly off a perspective issue in one corner, but emotionally true in a way I'd never achieved before. I titled it Inheritance and set it aside to dry. It wasn't for the exhibition. It was for Daniel when he was ready to see it. The following week, I received a call from an unknown Florida number. I almost didn't answer, but something intuition perhaps made me pick up. Emily Mark's voice, unfamiliar at first. "Is this a bad time?" I sat down slowly. "Why are you calling?" "I wanted to let you know in person, well, as close to in person as I can. I'm getting married again." The words didn't sting as I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange, detached curiosity. "Oh, her name is Vanessa," he continued. "She's a widow. We met at an AA meeting." "AA," I repeated. "Yeah?" he sighed. "Turns out I've been self-medicating for years. Should have faced that a long time ago. Anyway, I wanted you to hear it from me, not through the grapevine or from Daniel. I appreciate that I said surprised to find I meant it. I hope it works out better this time." There was a long pause. "I'm different now, Em. I know that's what everyone says, but I am. Facing myself wasn't pretty." "I know," I replied softly. "I'm trying to make amends," he continued. "Real ones, not just words. I'm working with a financial advisor to make sure you get everything you're entitled to from my pension when the time comes. And I've been talking to Daniel regularly, trying to repair things there." "That's good, Mark. He needs you." Another silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with all the years, all the history. "Are you happy?" he asked finally. "I mean, are you okay?" I thought about the question, wanting to give an honest answer. "I'm alive," I said carefully. "Really alive, maybe for the first time." "That's better than okay." He made a sound, half laugh, half something else. "You always were stronger than I gave you credit for." After we hung up, I sat motionless, phone in my lap, trying to process what had just happened. Not reconciliation, nothing so simple or complete, but a kind of closing, perhaps. A door not slammed, but gently shut. That night I dreamt of the ocean, vast, dark, moving with its own internal rhythm. In the dream, I stood on the shore, watching waves break against rocks, each collision sending spray into the air like tiny temporary galaxies. I wasn't afraid of this water's power. I was part of it somehow, my breath synchronized with its endless push and pull. I woke feeling strangely refreshed, as if the dream had washed something away. I went to my easel and began the final painting for the exhibition, An Ocean at Dawn, a woman wading into the surf, her reflection in the wet sand more vibrant, more defined than her actual form. September arrived with cooler temperatures and a sense of acceleration. The exhibition opening was scheduled for the 28th. My paintings were finished, framed, delivered to the gallery. Thomas arranged them thoughtfully, creating a narrative flow that surprised even me. He saw connections between the pieces I hadn't consciously intended, but recognized immediately when pointed out. "You've created a hero's journey," he observed as we walked through the space a week before opening. "The classical stages of transformation, departure, initiation, return. But with a feminine perspective that subverts the traditional arc." I looked at my work with new eyes, seeing the pattern he described. The first painting, a woman at a window face, turned away from the viewer, watching something out of frame. The middle work, struggles, confrontations, moments of choice and consequence. And the final piece, the ocean woman walking into her own reflection, becoming more herself with each step into the unknown. "It's strange," I admitted. "I didn't plan it this way. It just emerged." Thomas smiled. "That's how you know it's authentic. The unconscious mind is always a better artist than our careful planning." The week before the opening, I was a bundle of nerves, sleeping poorly, eating little, alternating between excitement and terror. What if no one came? What if people came but hated my work? What if I had deluded myself completely about my talent? Mrs. Caldwell listened to my fears with amused patience. You're not afraid of failure, she diagnosed over tea in her apartment. You're afraid of success. Failure would let you retreat. Success demands that you continue. I blinked at her, startled by the insight. You should have been a therapist. She laughed. I was married to a psychiatrist for 40 years. You absorb things. Now stop fretting and help me decide what to wear to this fancy art event. I'm thinking something scandalous. The night of the exhibition opening the gallery glowed with soft lighting, each painting illuminated to enhance its colors and shadows. White wine flowed freely. A string quartet played in one corner. People arrived in groups of 2s and 3s, filling the space with conversation and movement. I stood near the entrance wearing a simple black dress I'd splurged on for the occasion, greeting guests with a smile that felt both genuine and foreign on my face. Daniel came with a friend, not Eliza, but a colleague from work. Susan brought her husband. Several students from my writing class appeared looking slightly out of place, but determined to support me. Even Vivian, my painting instructor, attended briefly, nodding approval at my displayed work before disappearing into the crowd. But the real surprise came an hour into the evening when I spotted Lauren standing alone before my ocean painting. She'd lost weight, cut her blonde hair into a severe bob that emphasized the angles of her face. She wore a gray dress, simple, understated, nothing like her former carefully constructed femininity. I moved toward her without conscious decision, drawn by some need for completion I hadn't known I harbored. You came, I said, stopping beside her. She turned her expression guarded. Is that okay? I saw the announcement in the paper. I can leave if you want. It's fine, I assured her. I'm just surprised. She looked back at the painting. This one speaks to me. The woman in the water. She's not afraid anymore, is she? No, I agreed. She's not. Lauren hesitated, then spoke quietly. I lost everything you know. My job, my marriage, my reputation. I'm working as a receptionist now, starting over completely. I said nothing, waiting. The strange thing is, she continued staring at the painting. Sometimes I feel more real now than I ever did before. Like everything I built my life on was just performance. And now there's no audience left, so I'm finally figuring out who I am when no one's watching. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The curtain falls, and then the real work begins. She glanced at me, surprised. Yes, exactly. An uncomfortable silence settled between us, filled with too many possible statements, too many histories. I should go, she said finally. I just wanted to see your work. It's powerful. You're talented. As she turned to leave, I found myself saying, Thank you for coming, Lauren, and for your email. I appreciate the apology. She paused, looking back with a sad smile. Did it help? I considered the question carefully. Not at first, I admitted, but eventually, yes. Truth usually does. After she left, I remained by the ocean painting, watching other guests approach, study it, move on. Each person taking something different from the image, seeing their own stories reflected in the water. Art working its quiet magic, creating connections where none existed before, building bridges across different experiences, different lives. Later that evening, as the crowd began to thin, Thomas approached with a glass of champagne. Congratulations, he said, clinking his glass against mine. 3 of your pieces have sold already, red dots by the titles, and we've had several inquiries about commissions. I stared at him, uncomprehending. People want to buy my paintings, he laughed. That is generally how galleries work, yes. And for a debut showing, this is exceptional. I wandered through the space in a daze, spotting the small red stickers beside 3 of my works. The chrysalis, the woman at the crossroads, and surprisingly the ocean piece. Sold to strangers who connected with something I'd created. Who wanted to live with these images, these emotions, these stories. When I returned home that night, the apartment welcomed me differently, not as a refuge, not as a fortress, but as a studio. A place of creation rather than protection. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window watching the city's late-night rhythms. Taxis gliding along streets, windows illuminated in distant buildings, the occasional silhouette passing behind glass, living out their own private narrative. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Proud of you, Mom. You're amazing. Tears sprang to my eyes unexpectedly. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when something long tensed finally relaxes. I typed back, Thank you. For everything. Then I moved through the apartment, turning off lights, heading toward bed, toward sleep, toward tomorrow. In the darkness of my bedroom, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, a shape, a presence, a woman I was still getting to know, strong enough to break, strong enough to rebuild. Artist, teacher, mother, survivor, not defined by what had happened to me, but by what I'd made from it. The apartment was quiet. No creaking floors, no pipes knocking, no distant traffic. Just the sound of my own breathing, steady and sure. Tuesday night, 11:47 p.m. No visitors, no ghosts. Just me and all my possible futures waiting like blank canvases in the dark. The following morning, I woke before dawn, drawn from sleep by a peculiar quality of light filtering through my curtains. Pearl gray, diffused, the kind that makes ordinary objects look slightly enchanted. I dressed quickly and went to the park by the lake, wanting to see the water in this illumination. The city was still waking up. A few joggers passed, breath clouding in the cool air. Maintenance workers emptied trash cans along the path. At the water's edge, I found a bench and sat wrapping my coat tighter around me, watching ripples spread across the surface as wind moved over it. I thought about cycles, about patterns that repeat and transform, about how endings become beginnings if you change your perspective slightly, about Mrs. Caldwell's words months ago. They never expect women like us to win, and how victory wasn't what I'd imagined. Not triumph over others, but reclamation of self. A text message vibrated in my pocket. Thomas from the gallery. Good news, all your pieces sold. When can you bring more? I smiled, tucking the phone away without answering immediately. Time enough for that later. For now, I wanted to sit with this moment, to feel its contours fully before moving on to the next. The rising sun caught the lake's surface, turning ripples to momentary gold. A heron landed at the water's edge, impossibly elegant on stilt legs. Everything ordinary and miraculous at once. A young couple walked past, hands entwined, leaning into each other. The woman laughed at something her partner said, the sound carrying across the still morning air. I watched them disappear down the path, two lives moving in tandem, holding a future neither could fully predict. I thought of Mark in Florida with his new wife, of Lauren rebuilding from scratch, of Daniel working through his inherited wounds, of Mrs. Caldwell in her apartment filled with memories both bitter and sweet. All of us moving through the same world, carrying our stories, weaving them together in patterns too complex to fully grasp. And I thought of that first moment standing in the elevator with coffee in hand when Mrs. Caldwell asked her innocent, deadly question, "Do you know who comes to your apartment every Tuesday?" And how that single sentence had unlocked a door I hadn't even known existed. I stood stretched and began walking back toward home. The city was fully awake now, traffic increasing, pedestrians hurrying toward jobs and appointments. I moved among them, anonymous and connected, part of the great human current flowing through concrete channels. At home, I made coffee, opened my email, responded to Thomas about bringing new work to the gallery. Then I cleared my easels, set up a fresh canvas, and mixed colors on my palette, yet. Not because I had to, not to meet a deadline or fulfill an assignment, but because I wanted to. Because creation had become as necessary as breath. The brush felt right in my hand, an extension of myself. I worked steadily through the morning, losing track of time, finding that space where thought dissolves into pure expression. When I finally stepped back, the emerging image surprised me. A woman looking not out a window but into a mirror. And in the mirror's reflection, not herself, but infinite doorways, each opening to a different possibility. I titled it Tuesday Afternoons, and signed my name in the corner with a flourish. Not an ending, but a continuation. Not closure, but opening. The story still unfolding, one brushstroke at a time. That evening, as darkness fell, I received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Caldwell knocked on my door, holding a small gift bag. "I brought you something," she announced, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "A housewarming present." "But I've lived here for years," I reminded her, amused. She waved the comment away. "You're just starting to truly live here now. That deserves recognition." Inside the bag was a small brass key on a delicate chain. Ornate, antique-looking, clearly not functional. "It's symbolic," she explained, watching my reaction. "A reminder that you hold the keys to your own doors now. No one else can lock them or open them without your permission." I slipped the chain around my neck, feeling the key rest against my sternum, cool, then warming to my skin temperature. "Thank you. It's perfect." She nodded, satisfied. "Now pour me a drink and show me what you're working on. I'm not getting any younger, you know." I laughed and complied, leading her to my easel where the mirror painting stood half completed. She studied it in silence for a long moment, head tilted critically. "Yes," she said finally. "That's exactly right." Hours later, after she'd gone, I returned to the painting, adding subtle touches, a warmer tone to the light spilling through the doorways, a slight smile on the woman's face as she contemplates her choices. Outside, the city had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Inside, all was quiet except for the soft sound of brush against canvas. I worked until my eyes grew tired, then cleaned my brushes carefully and prepared for bed. In the bathroom mirror, I caught sight of the key around my neck, gleaming softly against my skin. Such a small object to carry so much meaning. A talisman against forgetting what I'd learned, that security isn't walls or locks, or even other people's fidelity. It's knowing you can survive their absence. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought of all the Tuesdays stretching before me. Empty calendar squares waiting to be filled with my own choices, my own adventures. And for the first time, that emptiness felt not like abandonment, but like possibility. Clean pages, open roads, unmarked trails. Some Tuesday soon I'd visit the lake again, perhaps with canvas and paints. Another Tuesday I might meet Daniel for lunch, ask about his therapy, share my own continuing journey. On still another, I might attend an art opening, someone else's work this time. Someone whose vision might speak to mine in unexpected ways. The possibilities unfurled like a map with multiple routes, all valid, all interesting, all mine to choose. And as sleep finally claimed me, I carried that knowledge down into dreams. Dreams not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd found. Not of who had betrayed me, but of who I had become in the aftermath. A woman who had walked through fire and emerged not destroyed, but illuminated. Not diminished, but distilled to her essential self. Tuesday would come again as it always did. But now, instead of dreading it, I welcomed its approach. Each one a fresh page. Each one a new beginning. Each one a testament to how completely life can transform when you finally open the right doors and close the ones that no longer serve you. In the darkness of my bedroom, the key around my neck caught a sliver of moonlight from between the curtains. A tiny star against my skin guiding me forward. Not to safety, there was no such thing, not really, but to authenticity. To the courage of becoming exactly who I was meant to be, regardless of who remained to witness it. And in that moment, suspended between consciousness and dreams, I finally understood the true meaning of victory. It wasn't destroying my enemies or even outlasting them. It was refusing to let their actions define me. It was claiming the right to write my own story, paint my own portrait, create my own truth. Tuesday after Tuesday after Tuesday for all the days that remained.